So with us is Tobias Belgrano, a political researcher, to continue the discussion and turning over from Washington's strategy in Argentina to Venezuela, where President Trump has been bombing boats left and right now. Tobias, Trump's approach to Venezuela is officially about fighting the cartel. Do you believe this is the right framing for it, or is it just a way to pressure the Venezuelan regime and change how it functions?
So I would say that there's a dual idea or a dual plan in this strategy. I would say one of the key points is also, as you were mentioning, pressure Nicolas Maduro's government. But we have to take into consideration that historically the U.S. has not set up troops in South America historically. Generally, it has been Central America the place of U.S. intervention and expansionism, and even the interventionism in the countries with American troops on the ground. So in Venezuela's case, I would say there's more like a pressuring or just a scaring a little bit of the government. But I would say it's really hard for the U.S. to intervene in South America directly, especially because of that the U.S. cannot underestimate the Venezuelan army, which is very armed up with Russian guns and weapons and weaponry against that can use against the U.S. So the idea is to pressure Nicolas Maduro, but also to enhance and show its power in Central America and show that the U.S. is going to use that influence and that leverage it has on Central America. So I think there's a dual idea in that, and also fighting the cartels. But I just think that's much more of an excuse rather than the reality. The idea from Trump is to show its power and pressure Nicolas Maduro at the same time.
There's also like a leak whereby the Trump administration had authorized some sort of CIA operations in Venezuela to what he called or they term as anti-cartel or anti-narcotic operations. What does this mean, and what's your belief is going to happen there when it comes to the so-called covert operations? It hasn't gone well in the past when the CIA interferes.
So we can see the possibility of the CIA intervening in the cartel war. I don't think I would need we should need to see in the future how that develops. The SEBIN, or the system of intelligence in Venezuela, it's supported by one of the most efficient intelligence systems in the world, which is the Cuban one, the G2, the famous G2, was even the SEBIN, which is the Bolivarian system of intelligence, was created or made by the Cubans. So I wouldn't underestimate the possibility, the capability of the Venezuelans to keep their territory really surveilled, and the use of spies internally. Uh, Venezuela has been able, due to this friendship with the Cubans and the Cuban intelligence system, to keep their internal army aligned to the regime, to the Venezuelan regime. So I wouldn't underestimate the capability of the
Yes, the
intelligence
Venezuelan
system in
intelligence, but
Venezuela.
but also, I mean, at the same time, Venezuela has been under a lot of pressure in general because of sanctions and further isolation. Do you think this might possibly play a role as well in how things will go for the Venezuelans, and what makes Washington think this new campaign of a round of attacks on the narcotics and further sanctions will help them succeed or possibly even fail in dealing with Venezuela?
So on regarding your first question, I think the idea of the U.S. is to pressure, as I was mentioning, is to pressure Venezuela and to show its power to show its power internationally. I don't think how much sanctions are affecting really Venezuela, because the main problem of Venezuela sanctions was before. Now I think there's a more commercial side of the world where sanctioned countries are able to operate. We see the case of Iran. We see the case today with Russia of India and China buying Russian oil. So I think there's a parallel economy where Venezuela is inserted, and that it's of the countries which are sanctioned. So I wouldn't say that the sanctions are affecting that much right now. They are still suffering the effects of the initial sanctions, but I think right now Venezuela is really inserted in a commercial side where you have Iran, where you have China, where you have Russia, where you have like a lot of India, a lot of players that are interacting commercially between each other. Basically, what has them in common is that they are sanctioned by the U.S. and by the West.
That may be true, sir, but there's also like obviously a multi-pronged approach when it comes to Venezuela. Now, we've seen the Trump administration bomb tugboats, and then the leaks of covert CIA operations, along with the sanctions. In addition to propping up some of the political opposition within Venezuela, don't you think this would sort of shake the ground under Maduro?
Well, yeah. I mean, Maduro has. I mean, yes, it's going to shake the ground for Maduro, but we've seen Maduro come through a lot of challenges internally. Even the 2014 in the 2014 to the 14th protests, where the country was almost on the verge of chaos, and Maduro was able to keep himself in power despite the unhappiness of the Venezuelan citizens and the violent protests in the street. So I do think it's going to shake up Maduro. However, I think that the problem in general, I think it's that generally Maduro is really underestimated, and however, despite he was perceived as weak and ignorant in 2013. He's been there for 12, even it's going to be there in power for almost 15 years. So I think that I mean, he even survived the previous Trump administration. So I wouldn't underestimate the resilience of the Venezuelan dictatorship to keep themselves in power.
Okay, now Politico also highlighted the influence of officials like Marco Rubio as well as Stephen Miller in shaping this policy towards Venezuela. How much of it is actually based on national security strategy, and how much of it is just political theater and, appealing to the Trump base, basically?
No. I think that there's an appeal to the Trump base completely. The Venezuelans that are exiled in the U.S. are a key part of the Trump supporters and part of the Trump voters. So they want to see a tough stance on Venezuela. That was a mistake from the previous Trump administration, when many times Trump called Maduro. He was very intelligent. He was very smart. He was able to keep himself in power for a long time. So I do think there's a political approach on that. However, I do think there are also new pressures for Maduro, and I want to go back to the initial fights in the Caribbean to show the willingness or the strength in the U.S. I mean, to show their muscle in the Caribbean is a way to pressure the Maduro regime internationally.
Okay, well, if we could go back to the idea of the boat strikes. Now, the U.S. has already launched a number of what they've called targeted strikes on Venezuelan boats. Could these limited actions escalate into broader military confrontation, especially since these actions are considered unsanctioned actions and extrajudicial?
No, I won't. I wouldn't think so. That it would scale up into a military confrontation between Venezuela and the U.S., because Venezuela doesn't recognize those cartels as their own. Generally, in Venezuela, and Venezuelan regime also does that with their internal militias called the colectivos. Their informal state structure, and they are not going to move a finger to defend their informal state structure, because that informality is what allows them to sort out sanctions, to internally do some illegal repression. I mean, there's a informal structure within the Venezuelan state that allows them to stay in power, and so that's why I don't think that the Venezuelan army would get involved if there's a narcotics boat attacked in the Caribbean.
If we could go back to the idea of the pressures that may be faced by Maduro, one of the pressures is Maria Corina Machado, a Nobel Prize laureate, who has been openly talking about her admiration for President Trump. She went on a program with Donald Trump Jr. and talked about how much she admires the U.S. and that American companies will come in and invest, she'll make oil privatized and so forth. Do you think this kind of propping up of this sort of opposition leader by the U.S., because she is there, propped up by the US. Is this a lot of pressure on Maduro's government?
Well, Maduro I mean, going back to what we were saying before, Maduro has resisted a previous attempt to have a new opposition president, Juan Guaido, which was the president of the legislative power in Venezuela, the Asamblea Nacional. So I mean, I think that Maduro has gone through this before, so we have to see how he would deal with this in this time. The difference between that time and this time is that there was an election, and everyone thinks that it was a stolen election, a fraud election by the regime. So those are new challenges that Maduro faces because there's a little more legitimacy fight against against Marina Corina Machado's claims for power. And also going to the previous column about Argentina, I think Maria Corina Machado is trying to use the same strategy of Javier Milei of showing herself as the ally for the U.S., which was also what Juan Guaido did in the past. I struggle to see how the way out for Venezuela without the military would be possible. I mean, the regime change without the military, without the internal military supporting a democratic candidate would be possible, really. That's why in the past, Maria Corina Machado always asked the military during, especially the election, to support her to separate themselves from the Maduro regime. So I think the military is key for a transition in Venezuela.
Okay, my final question for you here. How do these dual strategies, financial rescue in Argentina, as well as the militarized pressure on Venezuela, reflect Trump's wider Latin America doctrine? Is it coherent policy or just improvisation as they go along strategy?
No, I would say it's a coherent strategy in general. As I was saying, the idea is to show the region that the U.S. is back as a more hegemonic or imperial force in the region, and it's trying to show its political power, trying to give carrots to their allies and to punish its enemies. What I would say, we still need to see what will happen with Lula da Silva, which Trump in the UN mentioned as he liked him very much and he was interested in talking to him. So that would be a way of showing the incoherence of the strategy. But at least until now, when the U.S. has been very coherent in its strategy, leftist government had been punished by the U.S., like Colombia, like Brazil. Left and also forced to do some measures against China. For example, the tariffs on cars in Mexico by Claudia Sheinbaum's government. So there's pressure to enforce the left governments to do the Trump measures, or there's a punishment for them, and their allies are paid back with carrots, and it's the case of Javier Milei in Argentina.
Okay, thank you again, Tobias Bejarano, for joining us. It's been a pleasure. From the pegged pesos to pressure campaigns, the message from Washington is clear. Latin America is once again the stage where ideology and influence collide. As Argentina bets its future on a fragile currency and Venezuela braces for the covert confrontation on truth, one truth remains: Trump's America First still means America everywhere.